En primer lugar, gracias por vuestra asistencia. Hoy para nosotros es una fecha importante. Estamos exactamente a un año de empezar la 10ª Bienal de Paisaje, por lo tanto, en el fondo, lo estamos empezando ahora mismo. Este va a ser un año lleno de actividades. Nuestra 10ª Bienal tiene que ser importante, será importante. Creo que podremos mejorar bastantes de las cuestiones que hemos ido tratando durante ya casi 20 años. Y esperamos que sea, digamos, de vuestro interés, que sea de vuestro agrado y que sobre todo que podáis participar con todos nosotros, con vuestra energía, vuestra fuerza para promover, ayudar, explicar lo que es el paisajismo. Llevamos tanto tiempo haciéndolo que pensamos que es una labor dificilísima, pero insistiremos. También quisiera disculpar a Manolo Ruiz Sánchez, que tenía que hacer esta presentación. Está llegando, dificultades de último momento, que hará que esté con nosotros, yo creo que en 10 minutos máximo. Pero como tenemos una agenda apretadísima, necesitamos empezar, necesitamos no esperar demasiado y, por lo tanto, permitidme que abra este acto. La próxima Bienal, la 10ª, se hará los días, lo veis, será los días 27, 28, 29 y 30 de septiembre del próximo año. Exactamente, como os he dicho, hará un año desde este acto. Su título, Performing Natures. Lo iremos descubriendo entre todos qué queremos decir con ello, cómo vamos a enfocar estas sesiones. En estos momentos estamos en cocina y, por lo tanto, me parecería prematuro que ahora pudiésemos decir demasiadas cosas. Sara Bartomeus, que yo creo que aún está casi en el avión de llegada desde Estados Unidos, hará la presentación de nuestros conferenciantes y amigos que están con nosotros esta tarde.
Bona tarda a tothom, bones tardes. Abans de presentar els nostres convidats d'avui, m'agradaria dirigir-me amb ells en anglès, breument, per agrair-los la seva presència avui aquí. I'd like to thank our guest lecturers today, Gary Hilderbrand and Jeppe Andersen, for their continued support in various ways to the International Biennial of Landscape Architecture. Both of them have been engaged in different ways, being finalists, being juries, being part of the jury, being part of curator of exhibitions with the Biennial from its beginning. And as part of the Biennial family, it's really meaningful to us to have you both here pre-inaugurating with this event the Biennial's 10th edition and the 22nd anniversary. I will first començaré presentant a Gary Hilderbrand. Gary Hilderbrand, juntament amb Doug Reed, el seu soci, és fundador de Reed Hilderbrand Associates a Cambridge, Massachusetts. Tenen aquest estudi des de fa més de 20 anys i ha estat reconegut amb més de 80 premis nacionals i internacionals. I enguany ha estat guardonat amb la Landscape Architecture Firm Award i la Design Medal per l'American Society of Landscape Architects. Gary és professor in practice d'arquitectura del paisatge a la Harvard Graduate School of Design des del 1990. Ha impartit classes sobre estudis de disseny, tecnologia del paisatge i l'ús de plantes com a mitjà de disseny sostenible al GSD Harvard. Gran devot amb l'exploració del paper del llenguatge en la forma del disseny, és un reconegut autor i crític de la pràctica d'arquitectura del paisatge del segle XX. A través de 2 aclamats llibres, els monogràfics sobre l'obra d'Innocenti i Webel i sobre el Miller Garden d'Urban Keeley i Saarinen, a més de nombrosos assajos, ha ajudat a posicionar l'arquitectura del paisatge en un paper reconciliador entre les tradicions intel·lectuals i culturals i les forces contemporànies cap al canvi en l'urbanisme. També alhora el seu llibre sobre la seva obra, sobre el seu estudi, Visible Invisible, ha estat reconegut amb el Premi a l'Excel·lència des de l'ASLA, també. Gary posseeix titulacions universitàries de l'State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry i de Harvard, on va rebre la Charles Elliott Traveling Fellowship i el Rome Prize in Landscape Architecture. És membre de l'American Society of Landscape Architects i ha participat en el comitè consultiu i editorial de Land Forum, Harvard Design Magazine i Landscape Architecture Magazine. Ell i el seu soci han estat reconeguts entre els 5 professionals més admirats als Estats Units i ell mateix ha estat reconegut com un dels 25 professors més influents amb un altre premi enguany. Actualment és fellow de l'American Academy a Roma, on està residint aquest semestre, o sigui que ve de més a propet. Si us plau, ajudeu-me a donar-li la benvinguda. Please, with no further ado, help me in welcoming Gary Hilderbrand to the stage. Ja està posat? No. Aquí baix, no?
Sí.
Will you do it yourself? Or do you want me to do it?
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Jordi. Thank you. Good evening. It's great to be here tonight. It's a special honor for me. It's just a little over 20 years ago that I had my introduction to this amazing city because we had an exchange with Rosa and UPC. And then I had quite a long engagement with several of the Biennale. And I want to congratulate you all for really having a big influence worldwide now. And we all look to the Biennale. It's, it's a convening of a kind that doesn't exist anywhere else. And it's special with the Rosa Barba Prize. Rosa was a special person, and it was a great honor for me to know her, and it's a nice honor to be here among quite a few friends tonight. Marina and Jordi and Carlos, Sarah, and welcome friends from ESF. I'm going to speak about 5 things. The first is going to be just a short panorama of my firm's work. And I want to say that we work at many scales because, of course, this is the way landscape architecture is constituted. It tackles problems of every scale. It's telescopic. And it was around the time that I began to be engaged here in Barcelona that we built this firm, Doug Reed and myself, based on a competition which we won, one of the only ones, maybe the only one we've won, maybe 2 others over many years, for a project for a botanical garden, a public space which is in private hands. And so it wasn't dependent on public funding. It was privately funded, and it was the big kind of problem of how to create a botanic garden within that incredible tradition, but how to curate the experience of plants in this wonderful space. And then suddenly we began to get other public commissions, like this one in the Christian Science Church, headquarters in Boston, some work on the Boston waterfront, and work with art museums, many art museums, including this one, Phoenix Art Museum, a project with Todd Williams and Billy Chen after their work had been completed. Projects in Texas, we didn't even know why we would travel to Texas. It was so far when we started our firm, but we made some really great works there with just very fine kind of detail. Boston waterfront, the Poetry Foundation in Chicago, and recent work, we've been now working for about 6 years on the Lutyens House of Marsh Court in the West Home Counties of England in Berkshire. And this, we have been doing a major restoration of the work of Lutyens and Jekyll, rebuilding these slopes which had been erased away, and also making new interventions that are quite large in scale, like a grove of 100 beech trees in the right-hand side of the plan. Now, a little bit of detail on a few projects. We work for a long time on projects, and there's a benefit to this because you get to know a place, and you don't always get things right. You make mistakes sometimes. But this is in the western part of Massachusetts, in the mountainous part of the state. Used to be open and farmed. It's now grown over. And this meadow, I should try to get that cursor out of the way there. Don't know how to do that. This meadow is now the remnant of the former agricultural condition of the West in the state. And it's a big place, 140 acres in a big plan. And we moved everything on this property, everything, over this 16-year period. And this is looking back now at 3 buildings. The original museum building, which is this. A later addition, which is something that made a bit of a mess of the place. And then a newer addition, a recent addition by Tadoando in collaboration with my firm. And these 3 buildings are thought to be unified by this body of water that sits in the middle. This was kind of the first thought when we began first working with Ando in sketch form in 2001. This is looking at it further up the hill. So you can see we're really in the country, but this site is a kind of open fragment of a formerly open landscape. I'm interested in narrative, and so over the years, I've been able to understand our work in a way through the lens of the collections in the Art Institute. It's a phenomenal collection of paintings. And so visiting these paintings again and again, and also reorganizing the visitor's experience in relationship between the paintings and the landscape, it occurred to me that there were stories to tell through a reading of some of the works in the collections. There are many great paintings. And of course in this one, which is a master, an unnamed master, we have the essential concept in landscape of the hortus conclusus, in which we're always reminded that the garden is a place set apart, bounded, but also contextualized, in this case, with the urban condition and the rural also. And this, in fact, is like the Clark. This is like our work at the Clark, because we were making a garden. It's a big landscape garden. But we're situating that garden in the context of the village just outside. It's a very urbane place. And also in this larger countryside. They have clothed the wrens, several. And of course, Claude means for us allegory or stories. And I think everyone has their stories in a place like this. It's especially true for the community that lives there, but it's also true for the cultural tourists who visit maybe once, maybe twice in their lifetime. And up on that meadow, there are many stories. I think people come to this place and they take something away. In a way, the way we visit a Claude painting. There are about 15 paintings by George Inness, whom I think is maybe America's best landscape painter, my favorite American landscape painter. And one of these, the Pastoral, reminds us that this landscape, in fact, was a pastoral landscape. And you know, Sir Kenneth Clark says, if you have the shepherd, you have the pastoral. This is a kind of invocation of a way of experiencing pastoral landscape. This, in fact, was the pastoral landscape. It was agricultural, completely open. Everything that wasn't really steep or really wet was farmed. It had to be farmed until it was possible to move further west. Conditions reverted. Even in the early 20th century, as you can see in the postcard view, was still open to a large degree. This is the property that we're now working on. And even in the 1940s, this had not yet grown in to make the kind of figure of that meadow. It was still a very big open landscape. But now it's a fragment, and now it's sacred in a way. Someone's ticking. It's the computer. So can we move the cursor?
Yes. I'm behind or beyond?
That's forward. You're going to have to go backward. Good. Thank you. Thank you. And we don't have shepherds, but we do have cows in this landscape. So we thought maybe we have the vote of the cows for the pastoral. They got out one day and they enjoyed our little landscape work. This is another painting in the collection of John Constable. And he's speaking about common land. And this was another way for us to understand our work at the Clark, because the Clark is a private institution, but it's everyone's place in a way. Everybody who lives there goes there. It's their common in a way. And so for us, it was important to understand all of the networks of roads and paths. We built about 2 miles of paths on this property, connected to much larger network of paths, an understanding of the hydrology, which is, of course, always connected, and thinking about this as a kind of rural common for Williamstown. And when we make that, when we make an intervention there, we've always been tried to be very conscious of making a kind of very delicate rural character. Now, there's a big open meadow, but then there's also these quiet moments in the wood where you just maybe pass quietly from one bridge to another. And even in the making of the road bridge out of wood, we found somebody who could make a bridge that we could certify and insure, but we wanted to have the tire sound of the cars crossing the stream as a kind of reminder that you're in the rural condition. Another Constable, the wheat field, which I think is about labor. But this began to make me realize that we were building a kind of working landscape. So this is no surprise to anyone. This is a kind of X-ray view of the entire water system. You know that we now are obliged to account for every drop of rainfall in a site. What's the budget for that? And where do we put it? How do we capture it, convey it, and return it to grade if we can with soils, or move it to somewhere else and detain it if we can. So, you know, diagrams that are too complex to describe, but many systems that you can't see, they're not so visible. And in fact, even this big plane of water, which was intended to make three very different buildings seem as if they could be related, is in fact a kind of machine, right? This is a water machine. So the water is used in the toilets and in cleaning, and we take account of evaporation and drought and so on. And we cleanse the water before it returns to the stream. No one knows that. It's okay. But these are the invisible things we work on, the things that are behind the scene of a placid condition. I like this watercolor, Winslow Homer, in the Adirondack Mountains. This is a pond that I knew as a kid. He could have never called this ecosystem, but this is what he meant, I think. He sees this set of relationships among the hunter and the hunter's dog and the ticking clock and the buck. It's curious, huh? I'll just move ahead. Okay. I think I know how to fix that now. So, okay, there's a budget here, right? And there are a set of relationships, and there's the loser. Kind of the buck is the loser here. And the dog makes it very easy to shoot the buck. Anyway, that, to me, is a kind of way of thinking about dependencies and relationships in ecology. So we start small, but we think large, and we move out, and we think telescopically about an ecosystem that has, in fact, many, many scales. The last few are really about mood. Again, we come back to George Inness, this incredible painting and drawing of his own property, but this very dark, dank morning, or late evening, it might be evening. And this very wet painting, it feels very wet to me. And so this is one of the things we deal with. We work with atmosphere, right? And of course, this is what Inness is doing. He's building a kind of atmosphere. And we have the capacity in our work to create that, or to capture it, to grab it, to make you feel it in a way, make you feel the wetness, make you feel the damp, and make you see the water or the sky. And realize, in a way, then, a possible set of relationships between the constructed artifice, which has a lot of invisible things going on, and the constructed meadow, also culturally constructed and managed, and given back in a way. As you leave the paintings, you come out and you're given back this landscape. And this is something that used to not be possible at the Clark. So over this long period of time, we've managed really to reinvent, in a way, the experience of painting and landscape. We had a chance to work in a quarry, a stone quarry. This is a private commission. It's called Old Quarry. And I think of our work there as reordering. And so it calls to mind this beautiful construction of Ellsworth Kelly, which is a drawing reordered, right? Cut and reorganized. And so we had the problem, in a way, over a period of about 5 years, to understand the quarry and all the tailings, all the refuse, all the rubble, and reorder it. And we also knew of this amazing work, also a sculpture in a quarry. Maybe some of you know that. Certainly the New York State visitors know Opus 40 by Harvey Feit, who taught sculpture at the State University of New York in New Paltz for a long time, and he made this amazing work, stone by stone. And so this was also very much on our minds when we were taking a look at this quarry, which had been grown over, kind of like Rome, grown over. And this little house, you can, in a sense, you can see that on the edge of this peninsula, which was all quarried in the 19th century, stony Greek granite, most of that got suburbanized. This is the quarry itself, right across the street on the left from our site, and on the right, this was the found condition of quarry, just rubble, and survivors, plants that could find soil in the cracks and crevices and managed to grow there. And we learned from looking at these plants, and this also gets inundated with the tide, so we could understand which kinds of things could survive this condition. Now, the rectangle is a house by the sculptor Tony Smith. He built 2 houses. Mostly he made sculptures, which you know. Another house up here, a larger house, and then this one. And this is an addition by the architect Fred Clark. And you can see in the plan, there's a kind of very specific geometry of the field condition of the house, and then a kind of a little bit of a gesture departure from that in the addition. Because this house basically had no bedrooms, well, they had a bedroom wing which was torn off, so they made 2 bedrooms in the addition there. And a deference, in a way, to the original rectangle. And the seawall and the stone walls were there, but these are our interventions. And this was, like for us, you know, our work, an unusually irregular project. We couldn't do otherwise because that geometry of Tony Smith House was kind of important. So this house, this is the completed project. The house, maybe if you know the houses of Marcel Breuer, we think maybe that Tony Smith was surely influenced by that. The house sits up on stilts, and that's because this property gets inundated with tides in big storms. And so this is a beautiful recreation. In fact, this house was completely taken down. The original steel ground and strengthened and then put back and rebuilt, really in museum quality. And the stone wall and these trees were existing. But we said we could have some geometries that were kind of resonant with the orthogonal condition of the house, but not insistent ones, like delicate ones in a way. And we could take great advantage of these views of the coast. It's an incredible place. Almost as if we could think of ourselves as having a kind of scroll painting in a moment like this, where we had installed glass in the deck so that you could get these beautiful patterns. So we recreated the slab of the original house. We lifted it up just a few inches so that it would not inundate as much. And then we reordered the stone. In some cases, we just left it where it was. In other cases, we moved it around to give a sense of passage, of reordering, and really taking a kind of, in this glancing blow, the edge of the slab is really right here to our left. And so just a geometry that kind of touches and moves past. And then the bridge between the 2 volumes of the house. all stone found on site. And the jetty-like paths intersecting with the highly irregular plantation and irregular stone paths. Again, all of the stone found on the site, but some of it dressed so that we could have these precise geometries. And plants where we could grow them, but a lot of this is rock, and it's got salt water coming up. Let's see. Sarah, you're better than me.
We just don't know.
Okay.
No, that's, no. I'm gonna.
Well, I'm just going to keep going then?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were making pockets of soil, right, in crevices, just the way the survivor plants could be adventitious about little crevices, eventually building enough soil to get a root going. We designed a soil that would allow the water to come up and out, and we had to make sure that the plants could survive the salt intrusion. Anyway, it's a kind of important work for us, and a great privilege to work with masons for a couple of years on site, actually trying to not have them be too tidy, not too careful. Okay, another project on a river. This is a river I grew up on. My home in the Hudson Highlands, north of New York City, about 60 miles. And this river is, in my way of thinking, the place where the scenic culture in the United States originates, because we have really the first forays into great big landscape paintings that speak about the entire continent of the United States, or North America, as a garden. It happened right here. And so for me, a great privilege to grow up and understand that, but also a place where I first really fell in love with the landscape. And this town, next town to mine, Beacon, New York, was a tough place when we were growing up. You can see on the left, very basically emptied out. Almost no economic activity in the 70s, except for the drug trade. And gradually coming back, this great long street, mile-long main street connecting two former villages. And today, this is like the Brooklyn of the North, if that means anything to you. This is a place which is attracting artists and people who are interested in living in a little village, but being able to commute to New York City. It's a 2-hour commute. And part of the reason for this amazing change in the town is the factory where my dad worked, now called the Dia Foundation. And this it must be known to many of you, the work of Michael Heiser and of Richard Serra, and this, what Michael Kimmelman has called the great generation of American art, in this place, really helped to revitalize. And we had the opportunity to make a 23-acre park right next to that incredible museum. Now this is another view of the river from the bridge crossing between Beacon and Newburgh. And all this land was fill because it was made for railroad sidings. And this was our project site right here. It was a disaster. I knew this as a kid because my father used to buy car parts from, the automobile junkyard on this site. And this is what it looked like. So you have this amazing enigma. You have the Hudson Valley, this so important a landscape for New York and for the United States, for North America. And you want to protect it. And it's beautiful to be out there and experience it. But it's also a tough, tough, tough place. And poisonous. So we took many years to remediate. We just finished the final remediation. And, we found everything like this. These slabs were concrete paving for the bridge from which that earlier photograph was taken. And they were used to stabilize this land. This land is basically made of basalt rock. It's the thing you put under railroads. And the water can come up through it. And we discovered one day, we were out on that site right there, we could see that there was a little grid pattern of green and nothing in between, and realized that we were standing on top of these slabs, and there had been soil over the years, and where the soil could drain and where roots could capture the crevice, we had a kind of grid between these slabs, and that told us that something was there. And we reused those. Those became the surfaces for parking in the park and for a terrace. We kind of got rid of the tires and some of the other structures. Now this is a plan before our current intervention, but the first 3 phases of work are all of that. Here's where the slabs were replaced for parking, and there. And then this was the site that we've just finished remediating, and we are building now the final phase of that. This is, of course, intertidal, so these are buttresses and working wetlands to filter the release of moisture, both moisture that's coming up through the rock and soil, and also moisture that's coming in inundation. Now, there was a time when there was going to be a building on this site, a hotel, and this plan is from that. It's not going to happen now, so our final phase is also a landscape project. But I show you these because in 2004, after a long meeting on the project, the client project manager called me and said to me, what are we going to do about rising sea level? I said, I have no idea. This is 13 years ago. We now know a lot, right? This was not really on our screen, in a way. It wasn't our worry. But it's become our worry in a big way because we know what happens. When we have now increased storms, you have seen how many hurricanes we have had in the US this summer and the Caribbean. And this was one of them during construction. We were just worried to death here because we had just placed soil, no vegetative cover. Pretty tough. Then we completed the work of phases 1 and 2, and we got Hurricane Irene in 2011, and the entire thing inundated like that. But this was a great test because we were proven to be resilient. So the working wetlands worked. And we were relieved and, in a way, honored by the great kind of collaboration of ourselves, the engineers, biologists, hydrologists, marine engineers. And we've built a place which can now take this and filter the residue of this amazing thing. So in a way, we've allowed this town to reconnect itself with the waterfront by making these systems that, in a way, are almost self-regulating. A little bit of management, not very much. This is just a couple of years after planting, and these are the buttresses which hold the big water back. You can see that from the other direction, the kayak pavilion on the very quiet waterfront. And we had kept some vegetation, but our vegetation matured quite quickly because we had good soil design, we had good plants, and we paid attention to the way of making this place adaptive to those pretty difficult conditions of ice and storm surges. So again, it's this very bucolic place, but with also very tough processes that are visited on it over the years. And the last is really thinking about the city. And about 10 years ago, we had the problem of taking that horrible site and making something of it. And when we were invited in a competition to say what we would do, we said, we're going to make a grove of trees there. We're going to try to make a grove of trees last long. Here's my topic, really. When I think of the city, I think of the vegetation in the city. And we can look back historically and understand that, trees can grow. We can make the city by hand. We can still do that. I love this tamping machine. And so we wanted also to make that floor of the city, the field condition of the city, as if it were, in a way, timeless and also alive. So we know that there are tree roots. We don't see them, right? But we know they're there. We know they're there. And so we made a big work out of this. This is a small project, 25 trees and one growing medium. And we convinced the city to make it go from where we could have 12 trees to where we could have 25 trees. And we figured out, because we just didn't know how to do this, we just figured out how to work with very difficult conditions underneath the floor of the city and how to make that alive, how to keep it wet or keep it dry. And then the result in the first year of its completion. Pretty big trees, and now we felt we had learned how we could manage to keep vegetation going in the city maybe for generations. I hope so. And so we came up with this formulation. When we work in the city with vegetation, we have to provide the life support. If we want the performance, so if we want the performance of nature, which will cool the city, right? Which will intercept water and help with stormwater. It'll store rainfall, right? And allow it to be recharged. It'll sequester carbon, right? It'll take up pollution. We can't have it if we don't build the infrastructure below the line in a way. And so we need proper soil volume. These are the things we learned. And this was a topic of investigation with my students and my practice, a kind of overlap, because we needed to understand how to do this. And I'm quite glad about the topic of the 10th Biennale, because if you say performance and nature, I can only think of these two as intertwined, and I never want to hear only about performance. I want to hear about the spatial. And, we're reminded of this through great work of art. Artists seem, for me, always to show us the way. These two great photographers, Alfred Stieglitz and Edward Steichen. Way of seeing the city through nature. And I think spatial conditions are also performative. And we can talk about that. But we've had to learn how to build the vegetative content of the city, this one in Ohio State. How to make it diverse, how to get the right performance, how to make it spatially beautiful, how to make it continuous. In my view, the trees that we plant, whoever plants the trees, they're owned by us all. It's common property, in a way. So what you do to the trees, you do to me. And so I'm trying to espouse in my teaching and in our work and our practice careful ways of thinking about this so that we know, that when Harvard expands across the river in Cambridge and Boston, that there's a landscape infrastructure that's planned. So we've been advising Harvard on that for a few years. Or this is another competition, one that we didn't win, but we were trying to advise the National Park Service about how to recapture the experience of the moment when one stands right there and sees that, let's see if I can fix that, that amazing statement of American democracy, the south porch of the White House, and capture back a very big landscape that has been completely deteriorated and ruined in a way by the police who try to keep people away from it. But we didn't win that. And now also building in Boston a significant amount of street and square spaces in the South Boston waterfront. We're also trying to make the floor of the City Hall Plaza well known around the world and much disliked into a space that has life, to make the floor of the city feel like it's alive again, which it doesn't feel that way today. And so this is how we think now. We think above and below, right? We can't separate these, spatial and performative, together. So I come to the plane tree, the London plane. You have 54,000 London planes in Barcelona. It's a big urban forest. And if you just read the planes in the extension of the city, you understand the spatial condition of the city. The field condition of the city is described in a way by all those survivors of London planes. So I like to think about the species, which is the organismic, right? Its characteristics that allow this tree to survive all kinds of strife. They really survive in holes this big, right? But also in aggregation, they make for the living field condition of the city. And so we explore, again, the organismic characteristics, the seasonal characteristics, the fruiting, coloration, the losing of its leaves in a deciduous condition, the transparency of that leaf or opacity in low light, the incredible color. Somehow this tree, which is a cross between two genetically different species, has adapted in a way that exfoliates its bark. This is one of the reasons you have 54,000 of them. It survives. And it was able to survive the 19th century city, full of soot and manure. The Gran Via, trees are older than the road. When the Gran Via was built, it was an undifferentiated condition except for the trees, because you didn't have to control traffic. When you then had to start to control traffic and eventually had to build sewers, you had to work around the trees. The trees have survived that. It's incredible. Also, we just think of the color. Think of them as being pale olive, but there are many colors. I was surprised to learn in my course, Vegetal City, Plane Tree Mania, that the two cities with the largest number of London planes are in China. So interesting. New York has a large number. More than half of London's trees are London plane. This is a phenomenon that is completely interesting for me. More than 40% of trees in Paris, London plane. We have to understand, wow, this tree, this incredible survivor. And in its kind of natural form, not really natural because it's nursery grown, looks like that, right? And you have this incredible atmospherics that the tree creates in winter condition or in the summer condition. And so I'm asking my students now to look very carefully at the atmospherics that are created by vegetation in the city. This is in our control. This is what we have to build in the winter condition. And I'm really now interested in this coppiced form, right? This is a highly manipulated form, which you have in Barcelona, but this is a depiction in Rome, in the Lungotevere, where the trees are grown in a very narrow space and elongated because of the way they're pruned. And they're in the winter condition to be this fantastic space, which is in our power to create, if we can do it. It's a project I'm working on now. I'm spending some weeks in Rome understanding this and getting greater documentation and trying to figure out how to really talk about it. And then the last image comes to my home. So for a person who is dedicated to trees, I have finally had the chance to make a garden and to even bring a tree inside my house. I'll stop there. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay.
Torna a començar, Ha tornat a sonar? No era això? Vale. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Gary Hilderbrand. Thank you for your inspiring lecture and inspiring work. Thanks. And it's my turn now to welcome Jeppe Andersen. Jeppe Andersen és el fundador, el 1987, de l'estudi d'arquitectura del paisatge amb base a Dinamarca, Jeppe Andersen Landscape Architects. L'estudi, JAA, 3 A's, desenvolupa projectes arreu del món. Projectes que han estat reconeguts amb nombrosos premis en concursos internacionals i en concursos nacionals. I l'estudi compta amb una àmplia experiència en intervencions a la costa, en disseny urbà, en el disseny de parcs i en el disseny d'arquitectura. La seva obra il·lustra una finíssima sensibilitat i segueix un apropament clàssic dirigit cap a una interpretació totalment lliure de l'espai, la forma, la natura i la cultura, sovint aplicada també a la gran escala. L'obra de Jeppe Andersen fa èmfasi en la capa històrica del lloc i per això ha desenvolupat nombrosos projectes de restauració de parcs, molls, places i monuments històrics. És membre de l'ICOMOS, International Council of Monuments and Sites. També és vicepresident de la IFLA, International Federation of Landscape Architects, i director de la International Federation of Landscape Architects Central Region, que abasta les regions d'Europa, Àfrica i Rússia. És professor d'Arquitectura del Paisatge en la Oslo School of Architecture and Design des del 2014 i ha vingut aquí a Barcelona amb un conjunt d'estudiants seus i m'ha dit que estan gaudint molt de la ciutat. I també col·labora amb diferents universitats com la University of Western Australia, University of Birmingham i University of Lund a Suècia. And please help me welcoming to the stage Jeppe Andersen.
Thank you. And good evening to all of you. I'm here to tell stories. I'm here to try to give some kind of understanding of a way of working, but which is also a way of teaching, as I'm trying to do with a little help from my teachers in Oslo, to try to do something which is very much about sensibility.
So I'll try to show you, and you can judge whether you see it or not, but to show you how that have involved the things we have been doing over time. I'm a big believer of form. I'm a believer of things have to be given form. We are form givers, we are designers, and we should be very careful with what we do. And the only thing we can do is to be good skilled and do our best always. I've said many times at the university that I see our profession as landscape architects as teaching the students common sense. And they say, do we really have to be in a university 5 years to learn common sense? And I do think that somehow you have, and somehow you bring things in, and somehow we can use things that you bring in to come further and to a more detailed world, and to give the sensibility of light, of trees, of other things. I actually, it's something funny when we saw the last presentation that I sort of giving this evening the title "Looks Like Nature," in the sense that none of it is nature. It's all design, but we use the nature. We use the nature to give light to these things, to be very precise on form. So it's light which gives the form. It's not only when we're standing out there or making the model or whatever. And then the other thing which gives the form are those who are using it. It's the users. So when you go around in the Parisian park, you see these chairs, and they form a very specific pattern. You can almost tell the dialogue which was going on here. You can see who was alone, who was just sitting there because the wall was warm, and who was alone and who was with others, who were 3, who were 4, who left at the last. I love looking at these things, and when I was living in Paris for a period, I found out that each chair has a number underneath, a specific number. So we start putting the patterns every morning, and it turned out that some of the chairs move from one end to the other end of the park. To me, they look quite equal, but there are some favorite ones, and they do move around. And the idea was that we should put this into an animated movie, which I've never made, but I still have all the materials, so maybe we'll have the time one day. But there's something essential in it, that when you come down to Palais Royal here on the 22nd of February, it was the first summer day in Paris last year, and there was no doubt. You skip your lunch, you go down here, you lean back, you take some sun, and you probably accumulate 3 months of vitamin D, which you didn't got because it was very cloudy. This is nature. There are things you have to do, and I've been working very much with this. How can you go into the sense of what suddenly happens? How can you try to stimulate what you think people should do? I know this is a dangerous road, but if you do it right, I think you can do something good. And some of the things are very basic. Of course, you place the whole picnic and things like that in the shadow, and you go out playing with the child in the sun. That's it. You also have to put something which stimulate your eyes. So trees have to be beautiful. They have to be sculpture. They have to have season, and all these things we can do. But on top of that come this very simple things that forms follows function, and these are fishermen's huts in Sweden, and they are not for living. They're just for all the gear you need when you're fishing, and they're as close as you can come, because no one want to take all these heavy things into the boat, as close as you can come to the sea, and as far that it doesn't disappear in the winter. And those kind of simple boundness of things I really like, and I think we can read them. This is my own beach in Denmark. This is where I live, and we have the Kronborg Castle in the back, and I'll come back to the castle later. But when you walk on the beach, you find beautiful stones. They're not art. They're not masterpieces, and you find many stones. And when I was a child, I came back with so many stones that my mother sent me back again to the beach and said, you have to make a choice. You have to make a choice of which one you will collect. And I think that's very essential. When you see these shadows of these trees, which is in Buenos Aires, you also come to a point where it becomes complicated between landscape architects and architects. Because when I say to the architects I'm working with, we need this kind of trees because in 60 years they will give a beautiful shadow. I say, yeah, but you're going to be in the magazine next month. This doesn't work. So, well, your buildings are going to be in the magazine, but my landscape will be seen by my children or my grandchildren. And that's part of being a landscape architect. We're working on a very long time. And we're working with something, this is a still photo, but we're working with something which is moving all the time. Most buildings should be quite standing still. But you get seasick if you work for months in Centre Pompidou, which I did once. So it's just as when you've been sailing. When you go on land, it's oh, oops. But this is plane trees once again. And this is in Sydney. This is where I'm staying when I'm in Sydney. And you have these plane trees, and you have this shadow which is just moving. And somehow it looks exactly like the bark in different colors, in different grades of gray. And it's very simple, and it's not really planned. But someone had an idea. And that someone can be so simple that this is just from it's a stone in Olympus in Greece, and it's 1 centimeter of water. But that's enough to give an exact mirror which mirrored the sky, so you see the skies moving. And this also gives something about that it's not about having this complexity, which is enormous, but it can be so simple. Some of you have heard it before about this project, but this is why we made another project. But we came to the client and said, we have made a new project for you as we promised. And he said, well, you're 2 months late. I said, yes, it's true, we used 4 months. And then he said, and you're coming with 1 line. Does that take 3 months or 4 months? I said, for a very long time, we actually had 2 lines. So this is why it took some time. I believe in that, and that came to something that we have been working with. We have been working with parallel lines for a long time, and we are constantly trying to minimize them. You cannot do that when we are working with stairs. Stairs are some of these things which are bound to our body. And you never remember good staircases, but you do remember all the bad ones. And I think that's essential, that you have to put in things which will move a little themselves. That's what gets this jazzy feeling of something which you can never fully control. You cannot control the trees, you cannot control the climate. It does things, and suddenly in the morning it comes up like this, and wow, I hadn't seen this, and I just walked out from my office in Versailles, and then it was there. Oops. And in an hour it was not there. So beautiful. You're often giving these strange projects. A municipality in Denmark came to me and said, Jeppe, we're making a very big hole because we're selling all our gravel to the state road department. And I said, no, it will not be a hole. There will be water in it, so I'm more likely it will be a lake. Yeah, and that's why we think that, could you make it very natural? Could you give it a natural form? That they were the one who made the upper line. I said, to me that doesn't look natural at all. It looked like you have been doing something, so we take that away. And then I make the one in the bottom, which have sharp lines, and it's definitely, this lake is, it's 25 hectares, so you will get it on every map you get of the city, you see this lake. And I said, well, it have to be man-made. It have to be so that you can see what happened here. We made it, it's 10 meter deep and have fresh water, and we made a beach on the one side and a city on the other side, and people are using it for surfing and swimming, and it became immediately a success. We had an opening for that where the mayor said there would probably be 25,000. I said, no way. This is the whole city. This everyone in the city. They will not come for Fuglsang Sø, but 40,000 turned up. doesn't have to be expensive, because what you see on this picture is some gravel, some stones, some water, some poplars, 2 or 3 persons, and some grass, and some birds maybe. And that's it. None of these things are expensive. They're inexpensive. And they have no value unless you put form to it. They have no value unless you give them a very specific form. And if you do that, and if you maintain them a little, they will last for 300 years. This is Parc des Sceaux in Paris, one of Lenotre's parks, which have been the basis of many of the things I've done. But that's not the jobs we get. The job we get is making parkings around the architects' buildings. So I brought you this picture, which is a sculpture called Permanent Parking. And it's not that complicated to make parking spaces. The size of cars are almost the same from year to year. But the problem is that the one who want to have the parking have always miscounted it from the beginning. So we think that you can do it with 2 meter and 10 and 4 meter in the length, and it doesn't work. And that you have to tell him that he bought too little land. In Germany you have a very special form which is called Frauenparkplätze. They are 7.5 meter long and 4 meters wide. The idea is that the women can come closer to the gasoline station and take their children out. And of course it's the women who have the children. But Frauenparkplätze, that's a special thing. I think if we did that in Denmark, we will have a big protest. We were asked to do something for Ørestad, a big extension to Copenhagen, where the idea was to build a city on a land which had been reserved as a nature reserve, but now the state wanted to sell it so that it could build a metro underneath Copenhagen. The competition was won by 5 very young Finnish architects, their first job. And after a year or 1.5, I was put into it as a landscape architect and said, now you can make everything which is in between these 5 cities they have made. I asked the Finnish architect, why did you make 5 cities? They said, well, we were 5 architects, we had 3 weeks, so we made 1 each. And that was it. And I was supposed to do the things in between. And I thought, well, that's not a good idea. Let's do something else. And I was thinking of Le Grand Passy in Paris, where you had the wine storage for most of France. And you had these alleys, also with plane trees again. And you had, most of it was construction for the wine. Then in the 80s there was competition, and the winning team took out all the buildings, kept some of the roads, and kept all of the trees. So when you're there, you have a kind of a strange feeling of there's something else going on here, because you have a pattern from what was before. Very beautiful. And I said, well, let's do that. So we plant trees in all the areas that we're going to construct in. So we just put down 10,642 trees in mature size that will empty every nursery in Europe. And then little by little, when you start building, we will take them away, and architects have to keep like 20% or 10%, but they will be in a form where they have some kind of influence. Of course, again, the idea came from Lenotre and Versailles here, but we put them up in various patterns and said that we're sure that you can live with this, and we're sure that this will be like the old lady on the corner who's not willing to sell her house. So you have to build around it, and suddenly something far more interesting comes out than if you had the whole piece of land. So let's keep the crosses in here, and you can take away the rest, or move them to another place in the beginning. We also put in something which is quite huge for Copenhagen, because we put in 42 kilometers of waterways with deep water down to 2 meters. With a very special system, so that over time it would clean. We actually started filling up with groundwater, but now it's cleaning itself, and it's becoming better and better, which is really beautiful to see. And we put some lower islands in this university part, so the students could sit down there, you could have your feet in the water, and you could sit down there and have a break, and have some sailings over you, which would be pretty romantic in a very strong line city. and lots of plane trees for the beginning, because that's easy to have together with tough constructors. They leave nothing but raw gravel, which is not easy to get things to grow in. During the construction and during the first part, we had to change our design methods. So for the southern part, we made 3 lines, one which was a Dutch canal street, one which was a European park street, and one which was a forest street. And that's how it is if you go there today. And then a big lake for the water. And we have used this kind of way of going into projects before. We did it with this one, which is an earlier project for a Danish medical factory, Novo. They have 80% of insulin in the world. And they wanted to put up factories, but they didn't want to have it to look like factories. So they said to me, can you make it so that it becomes much more a campus? The problem with this as a campus is that there's only 4 people working in each of these black factories, so it's not a lot of people. But what we did was that we said that all trees, we plant them around where people are walking. And we put every factory in its own height. So this slightly curvy area would be so that every factory is in a different thing. So you have to go a little up and down. And even streets would, each lane would go like that too. That was really against the engineers, but it turned out to be much cheaper and much more fun for the whole thing. And then we were able to buy the whole area south of this factory and put in some enormous areas with hazelnuts. This is the biggest plantation of hazelnuts in Denmark. We put in 20,000 hazelnuts. So this is a place you should go if you want to have something for Christmas. And we also remade a small lake, which turned out to be strange, because when we have remade it, you suddenly saw that there was an ecological site in the middle, which was a historical site, which was just became so clear by the form, and we put in cows to maintain it. A very recent project is this one, which we did on the west coast, where there was also a declaration that you could not build close to the sea. But anyway, they had made a law that there could be 6 of these projects in Denmark. And together with Norwegian architects, I did this one, which is a platform in the dunes. So we have a platform, and underneath we have some of the necessity which is needed with many tourists, that there have to be toilets and places where you can change and things like that. So this is just a platform in the middle. And then something for the children, where we capture water in between all these poles, and slowly by slowly change the form of the sand so they can play there. I think that things comes up like that, and that's really nice that from not really knowing how you want to use the things, you suddenly get an idea. But all of it is about meeting. It's all about meeting each other, about seeing others, about being fond of and being allowed of looking at other people. This is Park Will, and you can only see that on the fine gravel, but it's here. I love to do things where this becomes the thing, that you see another person in 100 meter, and you walk towards, and they haven't seen each other for 5 years, and wow, now it's here. The 2 people here was at a dinner which I was at too, and we walked through the city of, I think it's Saluzzo in Piemonte, and this walk on a very beautiful road resulted in a letter I got 2 months later. Jeppe, we're getting married. Mm-hmm. They didn't know each other before the dinner. So. Mm-hmm. You do very formal things, and sometimes that formal way of working means that there's a really construction. Some of my friends who are artists made this construction in Lucca to show how the people living there were living in a very precise construction. It's made like you do on a sports field. It will disappear first time it's raining, and that's easy. But it gave them a feeling of how do you construct an oval like this. Other things we do are not really as functional as they look, but they have to be there to make the power. This is an enormous staircase in Helsinki, and it's almost impossible to walk up, but it's a great place to sit. So let's make stairs which are for sitting. Let's sit so that it becomes something. I ask these people, are you sitting here every day? Yeah, almost. Would you like another bench? No. Do you all live in the house behind? No, we come from various houses. Okay. Do you always sit in the same order? Yeah, mostly, yes. And this is amazing. I mean, and then when you take all these benches, which comes up now, where all the effort is done to that you cannot sleep there. Oh, come on. If people need to sleep in the streets, they should do it. I think in that sense that we have a very powerful position and we should use it. As planners, we are the one who knows what is going on. And this is Nigel Sangfell, who was married to Jean Tinguely on some of their early works, where they put up all kind of garbage, and behind the garbage they put small pockets of different colors, and then they were shooting at it, and then the color came out. It's just like being in a dark room. You're putting the paper down and suddenly it comes up. It's fantastic. Yesterday with the students we were in a dark room and I remember it. Your fingers were smelling for weeks. But this thing about putting the paper down and then the whole photo comes, it's so beautiful. I think this is our position. I think that we are the ones who knows what comes out when we're pushing things. And I think that's a powerful position and have. And I think it's it's a gifted thing that we have to do, that we know what is on the other side of this curtain. Namely, something which is man-made. Man-made a long time ago. These are graves in South Korea made 2,000 years ago. And they are nursed and kept all the time. These things, they're only cut by scissors, small scissors, and they're cut by women, only women. It's a king's grave. So by seeing the light like that, we get a position where we really have to do something special for trying to find out what way should we walk. What is it that we are going towards? What is it that we should do? What is it that we are proud of? This girl, she's really proud. She takes a selfie here. But there's another man taking photos of her. And I'm taking photos of both of them. And I like her shoes. But the projects you get, and often you win them in competitions, you have to solve them, and very often it doesn't fit with the brief. We got this one, which is Sydney University, which I did with my Australian partner, Mike Horn, and it said that we should pave the whole area with concrete and keep a lot of parking, and we should make it easy for people to move in between. I said, no way. I mean, this is a university, it's a public campus, and you have given the title public domain. I don't think that a car park is a good park. I think that a public domain have to be public. So we looked at it and I said, no. This is not what it is. This is, everyone runs out to their car and drive to their suburb. We want to have something different. So we paved it. We paved it, and we paved it not with concrete, we did it with granite, we did it in the same budget by being very wise about where we get the granite from and forcing the granite dealers to lower their price to half price. We succeeded with that. Now the price is the same as in Europe, in Australia, but it was not before. We put in water, of course, and we put in a lot of trees, and we put an enormous amount of benches for the students. And they see the benches as a kind of island. They take them, they sit on them, they live on them, they sit there with their computers. And we made some beds which looked like they are really kept and looked a little like Oxford, Cambridge, but they don't maintain it very much here. But they look maintained, and that's a good thing. So this was how it looked before, and this is after. And we harvest all the water, so we got more water than we could actually use. You're not allowed to irrigate grass in Australia in the summer. So we had to have our own water to do that. And we collected 30% more than we could use, which we gave to the neighbor park, Victoria Park, on the condition that they will remove the fence which was into the university. They did that. So the result was a completely changed campus where everyone was staying there. They were staying a little longer, and I think that's another purpose of the project we make people stay longer. Then we made some small gardens where you could go in and be very quiet, and the university said, be sure that the grass is not high or any bushes is not high because that's dangerous. I said, well, we'll put in bushes which are 40 centimeter when we plant them. But they will be higher. And the meaning is, of course, that you can sit in there with your lover and be quiet and no one will see you, and that's fun. And that's part of university life, even for the professors, I should say. We reused all the sandstone, which we got from putting 450 cars underground. So we cut into the cliff underneath and took the sandstone up and used it for some of these things. And then we got rid of all cars in this area. And we use some of the fantastic trees which grows well in Australia and which just give the season something special. This is what you can do in a public domain, and this is what I think you have to do. You have to be careful. You have to do something which changes life, which makes it easy. Now we're back in Palais Royal. It looks like these trees have been cut in Photoshop, but that's how they look. They are cut every autumn. And they're beautiful, and you use them. And you have the plane trees, which almost makes a cathedral inside. You can walk in. So you don't need a full park, you just need an alley. And you have the feeling of a park. And you need a little light, which gives it life and gives it forms and makes sure that that form you have made is a mirror. And yes, this is a Baroque form, but if you take the photo in another way, it's not a Baroque form. It's form given. And you change the city with these few materials, which is enough to make the most exclusive place to live in Paris. Place de Fine, little gravel. So we have done things like that around in the world, and this is Sydney again, where we put in, changed an old brewery and made a park and choose the architects. This is Jean Nouvel, who unfortunately built the highest buildings on the north. He said, we're building all the buildings on the north side so you get light down in your park. Hey, you're in the southern hemisphere. Sun comes from north. Next time he came with this one, which is a mirror, which put the light down in our park, so we have lots of light in park. And we put in water, and we studied the water so that we could do something with the water where it was really glimpsy and catch the sun. And put in barbecues so that people would sit here in the lunch break or in the evening, and the neighborhood would use it. And this is all the things you can do so that it gives a life. It really becomes to life, and it takes the light. Sometimes we just do it like this. This is very black and white, but the water is clear. It's not like these German fountains, which look like you have put milk in them. And then our friend put up this beautiful swinging big thing. It's 17 meters, and it's just hanging in one point, so it swings with the wind, and you get almost weightless when you walk under it. It's like you have been drinking champagne for hours. There's nothing below your knees. And put in lots of benches and other things which really give life. A much earlier project is this one. We usually call it a four-line project because it has one straight line, one curved line, another straight line, and another curved line. But basically, it's a parking space for the architectural center in Copenhagen, down to the harbor. And of course, the architects couldn't do it better than they also wanted their cars to be there. So, but we made it so that you could move the cars and you still have a nice plaza, and you have water in this one, which is pumped up from the harbor and returned into the harbor again. This is a very early building by 3XN, the Association of Architects at that time. But with the water, you really can do things where you have to think. You have to, what's going on? Yeah. Why that? Well, in Denmark we believe in mermaids, so that's maybe why. They're there everywhere. They're always there, the mermaids. They're singing for you and you're making your ships go on ground. But that water coming down to it is to me one of the essential things which many cities have severe problems with. This is a Hafen city in Germany, in Hamburg, and because the water is so low, you cannot touch it. So I thought, how can we do something to that? And we said, well, if we take the historical place of Porta Ripetta in Rome, there was a beautiful harbor which was actually a staircase, just like the Spanish staircase. So every merchant had his stairs, and he put his things so that they would not roll into to T-Bone again, but be still there. And so that, well, could we make something like that in Hamburg? That would be great. We didn't succeed, or we didn't win. So on the next competition, also same place, we made some other things. This was a night food court, and we put up big lamps, because you always have all these lamps in harbor area, which is quite disturbing. So we said, well, let's make one which is a little like the one you have by your sofa at home, but it's just 20 meters high, and it will give light all over. And we didn't win that either. So the next one was a low bridge in Pre-Biennal, also in Germany, where we put up another kind of light, which was almost like buildings, but basically they have no function except a bar in the bottom. But we got rid of all the other kind of light which would be there, and we made a low bench and a floating island where you could take the boats around. Then in Hamburg we thought, maybe we have to be a little more drastic. So we said in an art project, could we change all the city lights? So we made it warmer, and could we then put up artificial moonlight? I said, well, in the whole city? No, just in an area. So we took House, and we put this blue light in, and so that you could always only see one. But the result was that some people went through this area and start singing, like the moonlight serenades and things like that. And others didn't saw it at all. But it convinced me that if you put something into people's mind, they're very sensible, and you touch something which is deep in them. And I think that's interesting. So 10 years or 15 years later, we made this one in Sydney, which is just one bulb, a small bulb, which have a very precise place where the light comes from, which means that it also gives an extremely precise shadow, just like moonlight. And we put this up. This was a light festival, and we put it up in this tree. And my neighbor, who was another artist, came with 3 trucks and 14 people, and were working for 2 weeks to sample it. And I asked if they had a ladder and a place I could put it in. It took less than half an hour to make it, and it worked fantastic. And I was up there with the curator, and she said, Jeppe, what is this about? I said, well, you'll see tomorrow. When people come up here and are standing under this tree, they will embrace each other. They will give each other a hug. They will even kiss each other. She said, yeah, but that's because you want to kiss me. I said, of course I would like that. So we went up there the next day and did what we had promised and looked at the others. And everyone did that. And I think that if you buy one bulb you put up in a tree can make everyone give each other a hug in a city. You have really done something. That's fantastic. So sometimes the success of a landscape architect are pretty small, but rather fantastic. So we continued working with the light. So we moved our scene to Singapore, and I put up these 3 lines of blue, red, and green, and put it out in the harbor in Marina Bay. And by having the wave there, sometimes all of the light comes into the water, so when you see it from the other side, and then it becomes white. But sometimes the waves are so that only one of the lines comes into the water, and then you get other colors, which means that you get all kind of colors from these 9 lamps. And there are lots of light in Singapore Harbor, but you really saw this as a shifting. It was almost like you have found a place where the rainbow ends. That's screen with emeralds and corals and rubies and diamonds, and it was just blinking out in the water like that. For the opening, that Singapore is a dictatorship. So we asked the people who were doing this, do you think we could shut the light in all these towers for the opening? Yeah, we think that we could do that. So they shut the light for the opening. That's the thing. I don't think you could do it any other place. But they have a voted dictatorship, so they vote for the dictator every year. But the result was something which came out of it, and which had somehow, I mean, it's part of the ocean, but the light which came out was very Chinese in a way. I was a little surprised by that. It had a Chinese feeling when you look down into the water. So in that sense, we really succeeded. In Sweden, we did this one. It's almost 20 years ago now, 15 years ago, for Malmö. And the idea was that this place had all these stones which would make the city not disappear. And they had to go up 1.20 meters over the level of the city, which I thought was not a city. It was really not urban that you had all these stones lying there and then you would have the sea somewhere down there. Okay. So I made a big staircase which was running over these stones, which at the same time was a boardwalk, and then I made one staircase down to the water. This was how it was before, and it's not fun. And this is how it is now. So you could walk on this, you could sit on it, you could be here, you could read, you could barbecue, you could do all these things, and it became an enormous success. It became the #1 tourist attraction in the city, and people are there all year. They're always here. It's just, you won't find a day. And in the beginning, this was an exhibition, and people came here, and even businessmen, they would start undressing, taking their tie and roll it, and jacket, and be completely nude and jump into the water. And the city called me and said, Jeppe, everyone is taking off their clothes when you come to your staircase. Do you think we can do something? I think, yes, I think we should put someone down there with towels. And when they come up, they get a towel with the logo of Malmö municipality, and they can keep it. And they will take that, and they will change again, and that's it. And they will remember Malmö forever. So they did for the whole summer. But people continued to come in here every day. And there were many. They also started dancing on this. This was my hope when I was sitting in my office, that by making a 12 by 12 piece of hardwood, someone will do it, because you do that in Sweden, in the forest. But I was so surprised when I came there one afternoon, and suddenly there were tango. That's great. That's great. That's what can happen to you as a landscape architect, that people use it like that. And more and more people came here. And they had this way of using it, which I really liked, that you just go there and put your legs in the water and cool down. But many people came here. And the mayor called me and said, Jeppe, we have a problem. There are so many people here. We can't get an ambulance out here, and we don't know what to do, because this is too crowded. But Jeppe, if I give you an area just round the corner and you do something there, do you think we could disattract the people here to another place? I said, yes, I think we could do that. Nice job to get just like that, no competition, just doing it. So we did Badepladsen, which was a huge area with the same kind of wood, same construction, same dimension, and just big, and with 3 piers where you could jump into deep water and swim. And it was finished in October, November, where the water is pretty cold in Sweden. And it immediately had people starting swimming. And next summer, there were quite a lot of people there. They could actually not be much closer than this. And the mayor called me again and said, Jeppe, There are many people at Badepladsen. Do you think you could make another thing close to? So, well, they seem to like it. Yes, they seem to like it. Yeah, that's good for you, and it's good for the municipality. And they were there all time, early spring, and using it all the time, and just coming there and capture a piece. So we made Badepladsen 2, which is a Australian-inspired piece of water where we pump up water in a swimming pool, a rock pool, and that's under construction and will come soon. And I don't know what happens when this becomes crowded, but I'm sure it will. So, but I'm looking forward to what can happen. We had severe problems with the people that in the meantime have moved into the apartment because they said, we don't want to have more people here. And the mayor was very, very clear. You got an apartment in the first row, but this is for the whole city. We had to go to court to fight that. And we won, so this is coming now. This is not privatized, it's public. But some of the other cities along Øresund, north of Malmö, said, Jeppe, you have so much success down in Malmö. Couldn't you do something for us so that we could do the same? And I said, well, what do you think of? Well, we had this old-fashioned place where you were swimming in the winter. You could look at that. And I did, and I made a place for where even wheelchairs can come into the water, and you can also use it for your kayak. And we made a platform and made a connection to the city center. And we made these badehus also where you go out swimming and you have a sauna in the middle, one for ladies and one for men, and a piece of grass where you can lie nude, so they are apart. But I did put in a swing door so that on certain days everyone can use it all over. And this was a simple project, but and then we also made a restaurant beside, and for once, this is from the construction time, but I thought it can't be that difficult. I mean, I'm an architect and I'm a landscape architect, so we built it all. It is really difficult because it's 75 degrees inside and minus 20 outside, and you don't want to have dim windows. But we solved it, so it works. And you're sitting here overlooking Øresund and seeing all the ships coming out there in 75 degree very moist room. This is a completely different, this is a 3 days intervention I did with Marty Frank in Melbourne. We saw that the riverfront in Melbourne where the water was pretty polluted, but if you say to politicians that the water is polluted, it's beyond the 4 years that they're elected, so they don't really want to do something. So we thought we have to go another way around. So we bought 30 cubic meter of sand and put on the shore, and that worked quite well. And in a short time, even children came and were playing in it. And then we made a postcard to the mayor and said, "We have made the beach. Could you please clean the water?" So in that sense, it became a little different and much better. There's one project I've worked with over 25 years, which is very complicated and have had many political problems, and there was a competition in the beginning which I initiated myself, so I couldn't participate in. It didn't work. So after that competition, I started a project on my own from the office, and we said we have to do something for the Kronborg Castle, which is also the Hamlet Castle. And we have to free it because there were people who wanted to build almost into it. And we made a project which was quite clear that we would redo things from the original thing and put it in here. And we would put much more water in the harbor than was actually original and historically correct. We would have that so that the fortification would go straight down into the water. That's a fortification. It's a place. And the problem is that you want to sell tickets for something which is supposed to keep people out, which is not always easy. And we had to restore many of the fortifications so that they would get their original form and look much more precise. In the meantime, over the last 150 years, there have been a ship wharf which have slowly by slowly eaten itself into the historical site. And had big cranes standing there. We removed some of it very fast, but the rest took a long time. And then they have also had big cranes which completely shadowed the towers of the castle. And our idea was that we have to have water here so that we have the Renaissance castle on the one side and the medieval city on the other. And the only thing which can last over time is water, because no one will build in the water here at this place. So it was a kind of protection. There was a big island which was no use, so we said we have to remove it and make the harbor deeper, another way of not risking any buildings. And we have to put in this triangular thing, which was part of the original thing which was there, but of course was built up with cannon and things like that. And we used a geometry which was very clearly taken from the fortification itself, but with some small changes. I think that geometry really helped to keep the project over these 25 years so that no one would go in and interfere in it. But the problem was the politicians. We had a mayor here who really fight for it, and he managed to do that 2 times, and he lost the last time, which doesn't make it easy to continue. We had no money for it, and we tried to get EU fundraising, but we couldn't do it. And then suddenly there was a Danish foundation who said we'll pay it all, so they put $500 million into it, and we could make it. We made it quite simple. We restored things. So this project had actually 2 ways of working. One was a purely restoration on a historical site, and the other was an interpretation of how it have looked. And I think that was the success of this one, that we did respect many of the things here, but we also added things. I mean, this is one of the long benches, like the one we did in Malmö, but it's nice to see that there are days where people are sitting on it. A lot of people are sitting on it. And with benches, we said that this is a place where we like people to stay a little longer, so we made 1.6 kilometer where you could sit down in this, so that everyone could be here longer. And used an enormous amount of tree and wood and made it so that you can come straight down into the water. Changed the geometry and the function of that thing, which should continue being harbor and could have ships in it and hopefully historical things. And also grave this out. This was all a parking before. So where you see water, you can actually see the white line, which was where it was filled up to. But put it back so that it was a fortification. Put in benches so that those who have come a long way to see this could sit down with a picnic. And yes, it worked. We changed this from having 300,000 visitors to having 1 million last year. And we have tried, as in any of our projects, to take out as much as design as we can. Not to have handrails, which are purely 2002, but to have a design which is much more craftsmanship. So that stones here, they're not plastered things. They're full stones put up on each other. And the funny thing about that is, if you do it right, it's actually much cheaper than having lots of concrete and slim tiles put on it and things like that. Use the full material. That's what we've also done with our wood material. That's the full material. And make a form which is so strong that no one dares to move around with it. I think that's a part of a good project, that it really have a very precise form. With that, you can do things. And even here in the middle, we got the Maritime Museum, which you have all seen from Big, which was a beautiful thing, which came up that we should use an old dry dock and use it so that you had the entrance in the dry dock, but the museum was on the sides of all these things. It worked, and it's another attraction which came into this. I was very glad. I was not in the jury, but I was advisor for the jury, and this was the only project which really, all the other ones have covered it, so people should work underground. That's not even legal in Denmark. And Big had a much clearer idea about it, and I really liked it. So now it's there. Now we have 2 museums. We have all the ferries for Sweden. We had a really support by using real material. This is timber, and it can last for 100 years. The castle have been there for 900 years, so of course it should last long. Of course it should be like that. Of course you have to do things which are beyond your own age, beyond your own time, beyond what you can do as a landscape architect, so that it really comes in. This was made to defend the whole area of Denmark and Sweden, and also to have every ship who would sail around it to pay tax. It's still so that when the Queen, that's the one with the Toby hat, Teletoby hat, when she sails around it, they have 27 cannons fired. The one behind her is the Swedish king, and I'm talking to Victoria and the Swedish queen. I'm the audacious area, by the way. But I had a big support from the Queen. She really liked this. It's a royal castle, but she really followed it up all the time. And that's another way of working, that you have to have the support of politicians or others who can constantly say, keep calm, let it go over a long period. Let's have different politicians, and then it will work. So they fired all these 27 cannons, and it's really a show. It completely disappears when it happens. There are simple rules you have to follow. This is Pont Neuf in Paris. And when I came back to the hotel with my daughter, she was not that old at that time, she said, Father, you promised we should go to Pont Neuf. We were not there. I said, we were there. No, we were not there. I said, we were down. That was where we went down to this point. Yeah, but we didn't go around the tree, so we haven't been there. And I think that's essential. That's like when you're on the harbor. If you don't turn around the lighthouse, you haven't been there. Thank you.
So, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Gary and Jeppe, for showing your work, bringing us your thoughts, and speaking about landscape architecture in a moment that for us is very important, because we are in a year to make the 10th Biennale. So it's a strong moment for us, and we appreciate very much that you share it with us. And just to close this event, we are happy to have here with us the Kari Molo, the General Consul of Norway in Barcelona. Thank you very much for coming. En el marc de l'acte de Pre-Biennal d'avui, inaugurarem també l'exposició Noruega, Arquitectura i Paisatges, que presenta una mostra d'impactants fotografies d'arreu del país que formen part de la iniciativa Rutes Turístiques Nacionals, ideada per fusionar la natura i l'arquitectura i el disseny de Noruega. La mostra itinerant està organitzada per l'Ambaixada de Noruega a Espanya en col·laboració amb l'organisme turístic Visit Norway, i ja s'ha exposat al COAM de Madrid i als col·legis d'arquitectes de Bilbao i Santander. En el marc d'aquesta exposició i conjuntament amb l'Ambaixada de Noruega estem preparant pel proper 26 d'octubre un acte on comptarem amb la presència del despatx d'arquitectes catalano-noruec Mestre Wage, amb seu a Barcelona, que ha guanyat un concurs internacional restringit per la construcció del nou Ajuntament de Forde l'any 2009 i que ja ha estat inaugurat el 2014. Dono la paraula a Karin Molo.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes a todo el mundo. Yo primero quisiera dar las gracias por dar cabida a esta exposición de las carreteras noruegas, carreteras que emocionan, aquí en este Bienal de paisaje, arquitectura de paisaje. Simplemente, seré breve, simplemente mencionar que cuando pensamos en Noruega, pensamos en naturaleza, sin duda. Y todos los noruegos necesitamos esta naturaleza, necesitamos tenerla cerca y si podemos sentirnos parte de ella. Y siempre me viene el recuerdo de mi padre, que era arquitecto también, que ganó un concurso de una urbanización en las cercanías de Oslo, que siempre me dijo, dice, cuando llegué a la zona pensé, esto no lo deberíamos de tocar. Pero como mínimo conservar el encanto que tenía el lugar. Y esto es lo que creo que en Noruega se está logrando en muchísimas ocasiones y sobre todo si tenemos que construir comunicaciones o carreteras. De hecho, es muy difícil en Noruega, justamente por la naturaleza, es difícil construir carreteras. Pero si logramos plasmar el alma de la naturaleza en la construcción que hacemos, se puede decir que se ha logrado. Y en el fondo yo poco puedo decir porque la exposición, las fotos de la exposición ya hablan por sí mismos, pero, o sea que invito a todos a echar un vistazo y, ¿por qué no también intentar en alguna ocasión ver las carreteras in situ? Porque es segurísimo que os van a emocionar. Y nada más, esto.
Bien, muchas gracias y a partir de ahora nos vamos a la exposición para inaugurarla y tenemos unas cervezas ahí fuera para ayudarnos también a disfrutar de este rato. Muchas gracias a todos.